Mr. Cormack, it's 6:30 and we're ready when you are.
I'm ready. Good evening, folks. This is the Facilities Committee meeting. And since we have no public comment, we'll move right into SiteLogic's presentation for the summer of 2022.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for having us here today. We have a pretty light agenda compared to our last few meetings. We'll touch on our Phase 2 paving bid results, which will wrap up our 2020 summer projects. We have a few project updates that we can share with you. And we'll hit on a few board approvals, just what to expect later this month and then next month. And then we can continue into our operations, maintenance, shed, and salt storage facility. We have also provided, just for your reference, a board packet. This will provide a little bit more detail for you for some of these projects that we'll be talking about. It's also kind of a reminder of the projects we've been discussing going forward. So if we skip through, the second project here will align with the presentation, and we're talking about the Phase 2 Bedminster paving project. It also includes Deibler Elementary School and South Middle School. And a way to look at this project is as far as base bid, and we had two alternates, and then we're also talking about different types of paving, either remediation or application here. So base bid project is what you see at Bedminster on the left in the blue, and also the yellow sidewalk replacement at the elementary school. So that is your base bid. The alternate is alternate number 1 is the bus paving parking lot, also at Bedminster, that's highlighted in green. And then at alternate number 2 are the transportation lanes, also at Bedminster. The key in the upper right-hand corner shows you what we were looking at as far as replacement of those surfaces. So the red suggests cold in place recycling. Green is also cold in place recycling as it's allocated to that bus station. And then the blue is just a traditional mill and overlay process. Okay, so just want to clarify that. It's also.
Can I clarify that when you say red, it's that brick color?
It is.
That is in between?
Yes.
Right, so that, yeah.
Thank you.
That's all the alternate 2.
Yes. Thank you, Andy.
I've been told not to touch the screen.
That's very
I
good.
remember doing that a couple times. It didn't blow up on me, so I'm all right.
Okay, any questions on this? Okay. So moving forward, what we'd like to illustrate is on the top of the page, let's talk about the bid results. So we're doing a little comparison here. We have our Phase 2 estimate that we're showing. We had 3 bidders participate on this, and obviously bidder number 1 is our low bid. And we have our bid comparison for you. So low bid for the base bid, so that, if you recall on the last slide, would have been the blue and the yellow sidewalk. Okay, came in at $182,475. Now we have add alternate number 1, which was the bus staging parking lot, for $86,595. Add alternate 2 was provided to contractors who had voiced concern that the equipment that was being used for the cold in place recycling was difficult, and so difficult to source, excuse me. So what we provided was an alternate for a full depth replacement of the paving in lieu of cold in place. Okay, so bidder number 1 provided a number of $136,000, 453. Bidder number 2 provided a deduct, so that's why it's in parentheses, to their price. And bidder number 3 could actually perform it, so they opted not to include it as part of their bid. So we had talked about what makes a total project at Bedminster, kind of restarting the clock on all of that paving. we provided a little bit of what would make a total project for you there. So it would be a base bid plus alternate 1 plus alternate 2 with your low bid is right around $405,000. Questions there? I can pause for questions.
So everybody remember the difference between the cold in place and the full depth?
Yes.
So the full depth is getting the full asphalt, so in theory, longevity is brand new.
Why such a dramatic difference between the bidder number 1 and
The rest of the bidders? Yeah, that's a great question. So in our conversation with the bidders, it just seemed, number 1, we talked about that equipment being kind of difficult to source. And number 2, it was a little bit of what the market was telling these contractors, right? So there was a little bit of concern about maybe how they could, what they could procure their materials for, putting it down, and so we were starting to see that with this. We saw it a little bit at the previous or phase 1 bid event, but we're starting to see that now here. So bidder number 1 has been vetted. We've spoken with them. They're fine with their numbers, so that's why we were able to provide this, maintain these numbers for you with this bidder.
And the bidder number 1 has worked for the district. It's Barker and Barker.
Yes.
And I think from earlier conversations of those prior experiences have been positive with the district. No quality issues that we have learned of, and no extensive legal items that I can think of. Is that fair to say, Sean?
Yeah, they did a good job.
Yeah, thank you.
So the second table on the bottom half of the slide is really just giving you that whole view of the 2020 paving projects. Phase 1 and phase 2, with our total base, we are over budget by about $156,000. But this is now what our market is telling us for these projects. And then if you elect to choose or select phase 2 alternate for that bus paving station, or staging area, we've given you kind of what that down total is. And we're still on schedule for everything, no concerns with schedules moving forward with this project.
So the direction from the committee on is how much of the scope do we want? Do we want to do the phase? Do we want to do adult? Do we want adult? Do we want to do everything? We recommend doing everything. For the short story.
I kind of expected that comment.
Yeah.
It does match the philosophy of if you're touching a space, touch it and get it done.
Right.
Don't touch it and come back in 4 years to do the parts that you didn't do. It does match the logic we used it of the building inspector.
And that's what I should have elaborated on. If we went back to the previous slide with the color code, if we went and targeted certain areas, we're literally hopping over, stopping, hopping over, stopping, and you're creating a cold joint in there. This gets, you touch it once and you don't have to worry about it for several decades.
So
Did you say several
He
decades?
said several decades. I was going to ask that.
These are hot mics, but that
Several means at least 2?
We'll say about 20 years. Yes.
If properly maintained.
So the base bid plus alternate 2 is really what Melissa has down in the phase 2 total, $318,929. It's because that the lowest bidder contractor, bidder number 1, will not do the cold in place, right? So
Correct.
the $136,000 really becomes a part of the $182,000 base bid. There's no other way around that. They won't do the cold in place, so we have to pay for the difference. If we wanted to do cold in place, then we got to go to bidder number 2 and pay a whole heck of a lot more, right?
Yeah.
So our best scenario is bidder number 1, base 182 plus the 136, because they won't do cold in place. And then the decision really for us to make is, do we want to do that extra step at Bedminster to make sure it's done correctly? And we don't have to come back in 4 or 5 years because it wasn't done to the depth it needed to be done, and we've tore it back up. So that's where we're really at with it. Is that fair, Melissa?
That's fair, yes.
I'd rather do it right do it twice, 5 years. Because we got decades now.
Andy's promising, he's guaranteed.
Is there any worry about how far apart the 1 and 2? I mean, I understand what 2 and 3 are saying. I did see, I guess last week, that asphalt was going up 50% or something. So I'm just, like, there's not going to be any risk of them saying, well, we can't do it at all, and just leave us high and dry,
No, our conversation with the contractor has been, and there's been extensive because we had the same concern, and we've been over every inch of the project with him to verify that, what they submitted, everything is covered, so.
And I also provided a bond. They provide a performance bond.
Yes.
Okay.
So if they did take off after that, once everything's signed and is provided and they took off, the surety would step in and cover the difference for that cost.
Thanks. I don't know all the ins and outs.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's
no,
a little
it's
That's why I was sharing that. Likewise, they also provide a payment bond, so should they, come into financial troubles and not pay their bills, it's an additional layer again, protection.
I definitely think doing it once and having it all
100% agree.
at the same time. It's just,
Looks like that's the direction we're gonna go in.
Great. Some project updates. Yeah.
Serious player going on. So yeah, we're on the phase 1. The last couple remaining documents, we're still working with the township solicitor as well as the school district solicitor. We were actually just convening earlier this afternoon on those. That would allow us to send the last contracts out. The 60-day window on the phase 1 bids expires on Sunday. So just as we had projected, that we could get through this approval process and still have some time to spare. Should there still be any concerns with the contract documents from the school district solicitor, SiteLogic has prepared to, the code allows for the 60 days to be extended if the lowest bidder is mutually agrees to extend it, which we're prepared to do through a letter or a notice of intent to award, or if we can put that together and whatnot, and get us those additional days in order to allow for that last document to be reviewed by the district solicitor. Outside of that, everything seems to be falling into place, like we had all planned as it relates to phase 1. On West Rockville on the punch list, spring's coming up. Until it snowed again, spring's coming up. And that'll go back to punching out the final plantings, and then we start seeing green, and that allows us to punch out the final items on their punch list. Same thing for the high school tennis courts, skipping around there, bear with me. Same type of thing on that, outside, notwithstanding the actual tennis courts. On the tennis courts themselves, we're still waiting for that full, we need a good 4 or 5 days of 50 degrees or higher, and that includes at nighttime. So while we still had the great weather, beginning part of last week, it still got down into the 40s and 30s overnight, and it didn't last more than 2 days. So fingers are crossed, hopefully it comes out. But notwithstanding that, the school season, the tennis season has started, and again, we're still sticking through it. On the April agenda should be another credit change order related to that, reimbursing the school district between Semmel, the district's prime contractor, and SiteLogic, the transportation costs associated with the tennis season. At the middle school, as I communicated earlier or last month, we've really transitioned into an ongoing kind of, not so much punch list, but working through as new issues pop up, in that quasi maintenance ongoing. We don't walk away from we're here to along your side. So that's where the middle school hardware installation and punch list stuff is coming through. Any questions on these 4 items?
So just maybe a question for you or Carolyn. We just talked about this when we came in, Andy, but Carolyn, the documents from the solicitor, from the Township, East Rock Hill have come in.
The stormwater documents came
The
For the high school, middle school?
development, the East Rock Hill Township Development Agreement and the
We just got those things.
stormwater management operations that we were waiting for from the solicitor.
Okay,
Just-
terrific.
Just got those.
Okay.
So they need to go through board approval. When does this board need to have those approved? Is that something we need to try to push through this month?
I would
or-
do as soon as possible, yeah. Because once that is approved, then that gives us the ability to record the plans, get everything done.
Is there any concerns on getting it on this month's agenda?
Which generally is something we put in front of the committee, and then they get a chance to ask you guys questions about it and everything. And that's why,
Sure.
you know, when you're talking about that type of time crunch, that's why just, brought it up that,
Would the end of April harm anything?
Well, we just would need to have the plans recorded in advance of construction.
And so if construction's in the middle of May?
Yeah,
we're
so
still-
we should be, yeah, as long as we get them recorded beforehand. we're
Can you foresee any issues after we record them, that anything comes back and says, hey,
good. So once we're recorded, we're good.
we'll be good for May, or for April's
April.
board meeting?
Yeah.
So we'll add this to the next committee agenda.
That's good, all right.
So then what I'll do too is that we also, when we record, a set of Mylars and 2 hard copies. And then, so what we'll do is, we'll get the cover sheets to you, because we need your signature on the cover sheets, and maybe that could be happening at the same time.
That's a nine.
Everything will
We'll deal with
have,
that
what
when we
we'll
get
do
there.
is we'll kind of do this, like, it'll have, I'll bring it to you with all of our signatures and our surveyors and everything, and then you all sign it. And then once we have all the agreements in place, then I will come out and pick everything up and take it and deliver it and get it recorded.
okay,
Okay, so we're very close. That's good that you got that.
okay.
I'll bring copies.
Just what you need.
Anything else? Thank you, that's a great point.
Board approvals, end of this month, the Phase 2 campus paving and site improvements project. We just reviewed those bid results for April 11th. Facility committee approvals. What we're looking for is what we will talk about next, which is that operations maintenance building and salt storage facility. It's kind of just vetting out that timeline, right? Looking at the design and the approvals, the budget, starting construction, making sure everybody's comfortable with the schedule, and where we've been taking that project. Andy will have reimbursement to the district for transportation costs for alternate tennis facility, which he just discussed, and then third item on here will be those township approvals that we just also discussed. Okay? We're now getting into 2023 construction, but perhaps operations maintenance building and salt storage facility. Take it away, Andy.
As a trip down memory lane, we had last fall, the school district and the committee wished to pursue just a salt storage shed. The maintenance facility was not, and the planning for that area was not defined or decided on at the time. And through that process of going through land development and zoning approval, the site logic and the township and the school district engaged the community and received some feedback on both the aesthetics of the structure, location, and the use of the site. Concurrent with that, the committee had made some long-term strategic plans as it relates to the maintenance storage facility, and that has become now what we've been tasked with on looking at the maintenance storage facility as it relates to 2023. During that conversation in January, it became clear that the two projects should be looked at together and cohesively in the best interest of the school districts, the taxpayers, and the use of the property so that we can get some economies of scale. Where we're at today with that is that as we get into the next slide or the next page of the board packet is a timeline. We've penciled out and blocked out the property. At last month's committee meeting, we showed, I believe, a yellow block or a yellow rectangle And we were communicating out that all signs were pointing towards one structure, basically a 5 bay with the 6th bay being the salt storage, the salt location. And through the course of design and engineering with Schrader Groups under Bruce and K&W Engineers, civil engineer, Carolyn's team, the engineering and particularly the economics behind it have driven us to a two structure, I don't want to use the word campus, but facility that's enclosed. We're right now looking at maintaining a lot of the previously decided upon aesthetics, both design, shape, colors, some of the accommodations that the school district, the township, and the community members have discussed on the salt storage, sharing a common paved driveway work area that's enclosed in a fence, and the 5 bay structure, prefabricated, still as before. As we are right now, the conceptual over there, we're trying to work really hard towards getting into a position for an NPDS, potential NPDS permit set submission for April 18th. And if you kick to the next slide there, we've kind of blocked these out. So from a decision-making and conversation timeframe, so everybody's kind of comfortable with the process of how it's being transparent and thoughtful behind it. Today we're talking about a sketch plan. That's the level of detail we have. We don't have big pictures. We don't have, shapes of brick or colors or materials outside of the salt storage shed, which we've already discussed last fall in December. But as the project combined together, we're at sketch plan today, and then we'll continue through. And we want to, if there's a positive reception today at the committee meeting, looking to go to the community for some additional feedback, whether it's a community meeting, reaching out to the township, re-engaging them, because we've suspended those conversations with the township in light to the long-term strategic planning on the facility shortly after December. Target at the April committee meeting, being able to talk bigger picture, more detail of the project. We'll have a level of confidence in both the engineering and the design that will have specific sizes, specific locations, specific elevations, and be able to have a extensive conversation in this forum. Assuming that was positive, we will seek to go to an NPDS, which is the stormwater, the backbone of the stormwater regulations in PA, the backbone behind it, there's others, which is the longest lead time. It's roughly about a 6-month once you submit it to go through that process. That should push us into October. Then come back at the May committee meeting, which is, if you haven't looked at your calendars earlier, still May 3rd, I believe. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we'll have a detailed budget estimate. We'll be able to talk about specific numbers as it relates to the set of documents that are dated April 18th. Question. From a board and committee perspective, we're looking at the June 7th committee and June 13th board meeting for a kind of, this all fits what we're looking at. It's the right size, it's the right shape. Talks about what we're looking for. Keep going, keep pursuing what you're doing, site logic, and that'll set us up for an August bid period. And then when everybody returns for school, we'll be talking bid results for the September 12th committee meeting and the September 28th board meeting to potentially do that. That's the timeline of where we're at right now with the combined structure. Concurrent with this, we have some other milestones that all are contingent upon, obviously, the committee and the school district, because it's your project, that we will push out onto the township to see if we can get those similar timetables to support the school district's timetable.
And I see on the schedule that you'll put together a community meeting again, as long as everything at the April committee meeting goes well, one of those 2 weeks after that, to take this back to the community and say, here's where we are with both projects put together, so that they can provide feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The April committee meeting is on a Monday. The township's planning commission meeting is that Thursday.
Great.
And to be on that agenda, it's this Monday that we would need to submit anything. So since we're still at the sketch plan level and we're just talking now, you know, elevation 30,000, we're not gonna be at a detailed level for that submission to be on, we're not gonna be at a sufficient detail enough to make it to the planning commission to talk specifics. And that's why we're looking for sketch plan level conversations at this point, and engage with the committee's permission, the township at that sketch plan level conversation.
Can I just make one recommendation on your chart?
Absolutely.
Where it says, you know, others, but there should be a column that says township.
Sure, we can include that.
That would be very helpful for the committee and myself.
Sure.
We can line up the dates and understand exactly when we have to be in front of the township and so forth, or you do?
No.
We have that information already. We're supposed to get them back.
Yeah, we
I
actually just,
I
we
assumed
have
you
it.
did, so it was.
That's
it
where
was
all
solved.
that
I appreciate the tee up. I
It's
mean, we
consolidated.
Hidden
we
column.
whiffed.
Yeah. It was,
But we can follow that up with that information. We have thought that out and
Yeah.
penciled that out too.
yeah.
You wanna go back to the graphic? Any questions on the actual conceptual
Do you have any
of?
questions on this, or
Kelly, would you like to?
Kelly?
No, it's just further development, so it's a sketch concept at this point, getting the details. I think it's what we're gonna work on in the next 30
Yeah,
days, for
yes.
the most part.
Okay.
And that temporary salt storage is another thing that's not shown here. We're thinking at a different location. Those details have to get worked out as well.
Yes.
Boom. Thank you.
Any questions? No other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, next on our agenda is the Borough of Percy, the high school pool, use of lifeguard training, request for a fee waiver. So I will turn towards
Yeah.
Sean and this one,
Yeah,
Robert.
so, the Ferguson Borough is, looking for a way to train lifeguards for, the borough pools and also, the school district. They're looking to work in a partnership with us. They've had, due to COVID, an inability to train new lifeguards or to retrain lifeguards to do recertifications and that stuff. So they are, in a situation where they're in pretty desperate need to get people in place so that pools can be open this summer. So what they're proposing is they would like to partner with us to use the pool here at the building. We would waive the fees to the pool. They would train kids that want to sign up for this, and their cost would be less than normal. I'm not sure that it's free for them, but it's less than normal. They're able to discount the cost to the kids to get this training so that they can work at the pools this summer. And so that's the gist of what they've come to us with, wanting to partner and have some pool time. Our normal pool cost for a governmental agency, I think it's $100 an hour. I'm sorry, it's category 2, so it's yeah, $100 an hour. So that's what our share of that would be. For that partnership would be our cost of $100 an hour. So we would not receive that, but we would be.
Sean, would this be available to all all municipalities within the school district?
Yes, it's available to any.
So anybody that's a
anybody
would be a
wants to sign
lifeguard,
up.
would
Yep.
be any of the, because there's what, 3 different pools in that district? I'm trying to think.
Menlo, Holiday House. I can't think of another outdoor one in.
I'm just thinking so that way anybody that was in the school district would be able to, utilize.
What about someone coming from outside of the school district?
As far as someone who wants to be trained,
Trained, correct.
we'd be open.
Be open to that as well.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it.
Reducing the fee or to eliminate the fee?
So Dover, can you speak to other requests that have been passed in terms of fee waivers versus fee reductions? or what has been done?
Yeah, we
I
have
know
a-
that there have been multiple requests, and I'm not sure any have been granted in terms of the fee waiver.
Yeah, we have, there's a few fee waivers / reductions in place. They've been put in place over the years. One was back in 2010, it was for the turf field, for the community youth groups to use the turf field at a lesser cost. Their rental fee would be $100, but it's lowered to $75. Another one for the turf field, set at $50 per hour for the Jason Cup Memorial fundraiser. That was put in place in 2021. For the district buildings, we waive fees for the Penridge Community Education Foundation for the regional spelling bee contest held, and that was put in place back in 2011. Building rental fees for the Bucksmont musical festivals, Reading Olympics, Bucksmont Academic Challenge, and PMEA music festivals. Those fees are waived, and that goes back to 2010. We have waived the fee for the Science Explorers. We approved that back in 2016. And building rental fees waived for First Baptist Church, who they partner with us. We use their facility for our kids to do testing in. So we partner with them that they could use our facilities at no cost, if they don't charge us to use their facility for a testing site. So those are what we have in place now as partnerships.
So the last, sorry.
No bad.
The last one was something kind of what I was thinking about, so First Baptist, we do use their facilities. I didn't know that we don't that we had that arrangement. So I was kind of thinking of that as for this, like what do we get in return potentially from, because historically, like you're talking about things that were from 2010, 2011, where things waived.
Bless you.
They're ongoing. These partnerships are ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah. What we get is we do have lifeguards that work here at our pool, and they can be recertified in this program and trained in this program also.
How long was the program for? We know, I
I
didn't see
I
that.
didn't see,
Yeah.
and I didn't
I
see
think this
that.
is one of those things where we do it, we do it this year, we see how it goes, and we see if there's a need, to follow through. If it fails and it doesn't go well, and it's not good for a good deal for the district, then we look at not doing it anymore. But if it's something that looks really good and it helps our kids, it's really what I care about is, does it help our kids? Does it help our kids get the training they need, get jobs, summer jobs? Does it help us make sure we have lifeguards for the swimming pool when we need them? That's what I'm looking at out of this. And if it helps us do that, then I don't mind continuing on with it in the future. But if those things, if that fruit doesn't fall out from the tree for us, then I wouldn't see a reason for us to maintain it.
Well, we can go back every year and recheck it if we wanted to. And what about any legal liabilities with the training here? And if they would train here and go off somewhere else, or anything fall back on the school district?
So we're not doing the training. Training is being done by the borough, who does training on a regular basis. So they would have those insurances in place and so forth. If it's this being a board approved event, it would fall under our full liability coverages that we have in place. If the board approved it, it would fall under our umbrella, and we would have full coverage for our facilities.
Okay.
The request document itself says any Friday in May in terms of dates desired, so I'm not sure this is a long range, whether that means they need multiple Fridays in May or whether it literally is they're looking for one date.
Could be.
We'd have to get that clarification, but
Yeah.
the application itself says any Friday in May. It does not.
And the hours are
Does
flexible.
not seem, that's right.
Well,
I think they'll come when they can.
Yeah, when they're,
So that would be the other thing, is you'd have to make sure that, you make this arrangement with them, how will it impact other organizations so it would be good if it was a little bit more
It
firm
would
with the
be,
dates and times.
it would fit into the calendar when there's an opening. We
Okay.
would not push,
Just plug 'em in.
we wouldn't push one of our other programs out of the way. So we'll fit it in.
Shalita, what do you say?
I'm not opposed to it. I mean, it's gonna only help the libraries. I mean, they're gonna move their logo.
Yep, I agree.
So they're not charging the students,
Well,
But
you're
they
not
are
sure on that,
charging
it might be a
someone.
reduced rate or something.
or it's reduced rate? Um,
Yeah, they compared it to the $41 that the Red Cross charges
Yep.
for the same type of certification. I don't know if they'll be identical, but that's what they compare it to in their cover letter.
Right. And at some points, those kids paid upwards of $200 for the training. So it's a significant decrease for them.
What does the committee say?
I see.
All right, let's take it to the board from a yes vote.
Absolutely.
I think
Okay.
we'll just have to think about how it will affect future, decisions.
Well, we'll do it on a year-to-year basis and leave it at that.
Oh, no, I mean, for other organizations
Yeah.
and things, so.
Yeah, that's why we bring it to you, and we kind of have it in the language of our policy that if Dr. Bolton and I don't agree with a request, it doesn't even come to you. That's the way the board has set it up in the past, but this is one that we thought was beneficial to our kids. That's why we brought it to you.
Great,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Obsolete items for review. Back to you, Mr. Dummett.
All right, we have a list of musical instruments to go to our public surplus to be sold. These instruments are old and past repair, or they've taken a beating over the years, for lack of a better term.
I heard they're gonna wind up in someone's barn.
Well, if the price is right, they might. They'll go on the public surplus.
Great.
Whoever pays the highest bid will get them. The next Central Middle School has various TVs, VHS recording systems, cameras, VCRs, DVD players, and so forth that are all no longer used. So we will put them on our public surplus, and if they're broken, we'll recycle them. Sellersville Elementary, Booth Elementary, both have weeding logs, library weeding logs for your approval, and then those books will be also put on public surplus to be sold. And then the technology department has its February recycling list of old obsolete computers and so forth for your approval. And we'll dispose of those through recycling. And then the high school has a library weeding list and also various pieces of equipment to be disposed of or sold. And then North Middle School has a number of pieces of gym equipment that are no longer used, and they're running out of storage space for them, so they would like to get them out of the building, and we will try to sell them on public surplus. That's what we have for that.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that update. Our next meeting, Finance Committee meeting, is scheduled for April 11th, 2022.
Facility.
That's it? What did I say? Did I say finance? I said, okay, facility, sorry.
Are you trying to jump?
Sorry, Dave.
Is there, John, we need to check if there's any public comments. There's none. There are none. No, thank you. Then I guess we can just move it right into finance committee meeting. All right, no public comment, no 903 policy. Explorations PHP. That is for, partial
Contract?
Yeah, contracts?
Contract.
All right, so we have a list of contracts here for your review and approval this month. The first one is the Explorations PHP. It's a partial hospitalization program for a student, and we need to provide the educational services. The students in that program cost us $75 per hour, and it runs approximately February 1st through June 30th this year. The next is the Valley Forge Educational System. Again, a student that is placed in a educational situation, district needs to provide for meals for that student, along with his education, his or her education. Cost is $1,089, and that's prorated or I'm sorry, that's the annual rate, yes. And it runs from February 22nd through June 30th. Just make sure. Yeah, the annual rate is $1,089, so it'll be good. Next one is Camp Meadowlawn. This is a team building retreat that a number of our teachers are going to take place or take part in. This actually happens on a Saturday. We have a group of teachers that want to do this program on Saturday, Saturday, April 30th. Cost is $193. And this, I believe, is paid for through our Title II funds for staff development.
Gonna do the ropes course.
Gonna do the ropes, yep.
Alright.
Yep. Dr. Barczyk promised me they weren't ropes that were any more than a foot off the ground.
In my family, that wouldn't matter. Damn it.
The next is Camp America Day Camp. This is for Siler Elementary School. This is for their end of year picnic. And the cost for this is going to be parent paid. But the district's collecting the money and will pay the bills, so the contract is to come through the district. It is not going through the Pullman school there. Next is PBIS Rewards is a renewal for South Middle School. This is for their positive behavioral interventions and supports program for next school year. Cost is $1537. Last year it was $1572, so the costs come down a little bit. Next is Toasty. Dr. Gold, did I say it right this year?
Tosti.
Tosti, no, see it? It's my central Pennsylvania accent. Tosti fundraising, magazine and cookie sales for the middle schools for next school year. So each of the 3 middle schools do that each year. Next is the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit. This is intergovernmental agreement for special education services for next year. We put these agreements in with each of the IUs in the area for any special ed services that are needed, so that we have those agreements in place in case something comes up for a particular student. So, and the next is the Sweet Stevens. This is the annual legal services consultation agreement. Cost is $12,000. It's been that same price since I came. And this is the retainer for the services as outlined in the agreement that our special education department, our pupil services department gets a number of different programs and a number of hours of legal services and so forth for our special education needs. And then the last contract is the annual leader services agreement. This is for our IEP writer. Again, it's a renewal and runs from May 1st, 2022 to April 30th, 2023. The cost is $26,944, which is down a little bit from the current year of $27,403. So that's it for contracts.
I have a question.
Sure.
The 2 things. And one, how is it determined? Is it just the IEP that determines who gets, the special services or something, or what happens with that? Yeah, when we have to approve, it's for, we don't identify the student, we use a number, but how is it, we just have to, what is it that the school district's responsible for with regard to that? And can you have, like, if somebody wants to go to private school somewhere and then we're obligated to pay it, or how is that happening?
All of that's done through the student's IEP, so there is a series of meetings. The majority of the services are provided in the school. There are special circumstances. Sometimes you'll see where there's a medical situation, and so the student, we're still responsible for their educational piece, and so we'll need to provide that. So sometimes you'll see that through tutoring, you'll see that through services at a medical institution.
But the one was for food or something,
So-
wasn't it?
Lunch.
Well, that's, yeah, because the student's there, so providing the food for the student while they're there over lunchtime.
I was wondering too, is that typical? Is that because we're still in this, here, the lunches are still being provided, right, for all students? But is that a typical thing for other placements?
Yeah, an outside placement wouldn't be part of the National School Lunch Program. so they couldn't provide it to free lunches like we can here through the
Well,
national school lunch.
So that's what I mean, like, this is the first time I can remember seeing it, but I was wondering, is it because we're in a situation, if the student were here, the lunches would be provided because of what we're, okay.
Yeah, that is true, and most of the agreements would just have that cost in. They wouldn't piece out the meals separately.
Yeah, this is the first one I've seen where it's
It would
pieced
be
out.
the student comes for the day and everything associated with that day is in the cost. And so the student would be fed there from that standpoint. But this is the first one that I've seen that lists that as a separate.
And then why do we pay a separate fee to Sweet Stevens apart from our solicitor?
Yeah. So Sweet Stevens is who we have, I don't know for how long we've had the contract. It's been before me.
Before me.
Before Mr. Dahlberg as well. And they are our pool counsel for special education. And so the contract provides multiple services, but the primary one is consult. And so the attorney will come in and meet with our staff, generally monthly, and either do half days or full days, depending on the number of issues they need to talk through, and talk about upcoming cases or talk about particular IEP or parent meetings that might be coming to kind of game plan and get a sense for what we need to do from a legal standpoint. They also provide professional development, either for new teachers. There's always one day full of professional learning. Sometimes it's special ed staff, sometimes it's regular ed staff, sometimes it's administrators, often broken up over the course of the year in terms of that time, and then that's for that flat fee. There is then obviously separate, if we're then going to due process or an arbitration, that's not included in that part of the contract. There's then separate, and sometimes we'll use them, sometimes we will use our solicitor, depending on what the issue is and what's going forward.
What's the positive behaviors program at Siler?
So at the middle schools,
It's south.
it's at the
Oh,
three.
south, okay.
And so it's a program that they brought in 2 years ago, I believe. I believe this is the third year that it's moved. And it's a program that they use to motivate positive behaviors and to recognize positive behaviors. And so it is a set program that their teachers have been trained on and they work through with their students.
Is it like rewards they get?
It
for
is,
points
that's
or
part of
something?
it,
Okay.
but it's also in terms of teaching them positive behaviors. And then there are rewards for students who receive
Like
whatever
gifts
the
or
golden
something?
tickets are and
Okay.
things like that. It's usually experiences.
Okay.
And I can put you in contact with one of the principals if you need more specific details about that in terms of what it looks like month in and month out. But I know that through social media or being there in bulletin boards, there are monthly recognitions for the students who have, and whatever it is that month that they're working on, and then there are rewards associated with that.
I didn't see it the first time I looked, but there's a link
Oh,
to the
okay.
website on that,
Okay.
that
Oh,
is,
yes.
it does work if you click on it.
The South's a Title I school, so we're able to use
Oh,
our Title
right.
I funding to pay for that, and we do that.
Got it.
And then as far as the Camp America, I was just curious if the other elementary schools are gonna go back to, they all used to.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any changes in that, Mrs. Cullen. What the change is here is that that particular school's home and school decided not to pay for that anymore. So now it's being parent paid, so it has to run through the district.
Okay, all right.
And this is combined with Grass, right? This is two schools.
Yeah, I
They
believe that-
decided
that
Grass
is
used to go,
contract.
because then they
Right.
would go to Central together for school, so it was kind of like a.
That's how I understand it. Yeah.
And then next
Yeah.
is student activity camp.
Yeah, the next one, our Turning Point USA Club here at Penridge High School has been in place for a few years, but now they're asking for a student activities account because they would like to raise funds and do some things that way. Before they haven't had that in place. So now they're advancing them and would like to do that. So that's what this is asking for, is to have approval to put a student activities account in place for them.
General fund budget review.
All right, so we have three budgets tonight to go over, our first three. We're gonna start with transportation, and Mrs. Jessica Kraus is here tonight. And I'll let Jessica introduce Rose, her assistant transportation director. But we'll let Jessica go first, and she's gonna go through her budget, and then Kelly will go, and then I'll do the general fund, so.
Hi Hi, good evening. I'm Jessica Kraus, Director of Transportation. This is my assistant, Rose Frobel. Normally I start with droning over how dry it's going to be, and you've all been through this before, but I recognize new faces, so.
Always exciting, it's the bus routes.
Right. So we like to start with kind of going over some of the statistics of what we've transported previously. So in 2020, 2021, we transported 94 home-to-school routes, 44 homeless and foster students. We performed 34 work studies and midday routes. Additionally to those 34 middays, this was during our COVID year. So we had 10 buses running an A and B midday route schedules, and those were up to our techs. We had on Monday, we had 15 launch in midday routes, 7 launch out midday routes. We had 9 launch home routes. We had 8 remote midday routes. So our students that were doing remote were still being transported to the tech school. And we had 2 buses that took 2:00 p.m. home routes on Mondays. We had the Tuesday, Wednesday, or the Tuesday, Thursday, and Wednesday, Friday schedule, and then we had our launch. We had 6 late bus routes running. We only did 325 athletic contests and practices. We did 0 field trips that year, and we ran 22 summer school routes. So these numbers, other than our home to school routes, was approximately normal. Our homeless foster was approximately normal. Our work studies were up, and everything else was very down.
How come the homeless fosters identified differently than the home to school routes?
Because those students are either our students that are homeless and placed outside of the district.
So they're outside the district then?
Yes, they can also be inside of the district as well, but the majority of them do go outside of the district. We're also responsible to transport any homeless or foster student from any other district that is displaced and living in our district. So what we do is we share those transportation costs with whatever the other district is. So we might be the home district where our student is living somewhere else. We do transportation one way, and the district that they're residing in temporarily does transportation the other way, and then vice versa if their students coming into our district. Okay, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to see. Going down our budget here, we have travel, and we have not done any travel, so that's why that number is low. We just kept the budget the same so that hopefully we can get back to doing that.
What does that mean, travel?
So that's like going to PASBO, different professional travels. Mm-hmm.
Thinking the bus travels all the time.
Other professional services, I've kind of broken down the explanation over on the right-hand side this year. So that, even though it's grouped as something different, so that money is for our physicals and our drug testing. So our drivers are required to have an annual physical every year. We perform those twice a year, so we do half the group one time and half the group the other time. Drug testing would be, it's federally mandated for the school bus drivers, and we do that both pre-employment and on a random basis. So we have a company that randomly draws the last 4 digits of the driver's social security numbers, and they send us a random list, and then we have the nurses and doctors come in and perform that test as they come in from their morning routes. And so if you notice, some of our actuals are a little bit low for the 2021 year, but that is where we actually should be, is the 11.9. The next account is for office supplies. We're just going to break even there, remaining the same. Meals and refreshments. So the meals and refreshments, we do provide our drivers with some meals and refreshments on their startup meeting in the beginning of the school year. We also provide them an appreciation lunch during school bus appreciation week during February. and those costs have gone up significantly. We do purchase everything through our food services departments, and we just had our appreciation day for our drivers, and we had fresh baked cookies and muffins and things like that from the VOTEC that they brought down. Tech supplies and fees. So this is a 4% increase for our hosting fees for VersaTrans. So VersaTrans is our system that we use for routing, for our trips, and also for our fleet maintenance in the garage. So that is the just the hosting fee. When we continue on, you'll see that there's some annual maintenance fees. So that's the hosting fee. Dues and fees. So this was incorrectly billed previously, so that's why it's gone up a little bit. And those dues and fees are for like our tanks and things like that. Rose and I are also part of the Montgomery Bucks People Transportation Association, so there's $40 in there for that annually for the two of us. Vehicle operations, we have transportation services that are contracted out. This line account here, 513, is contracted out through Pupil Services. And so this is part of the Lakeside School contract with Pupil Services, and the transportation is grouped into that contract, so we must contract that out. We transport approximately 9 students, about $85 per day. So that's where that total comes to. The reason why that is contracted out through Lakeside is, one, it's in their contract. It's a specialized school, emotional support, and so those drivers are also part of that school team, so they're different than our drivers. Transportation services through the intermediate unit. So this would be some of our special ed students that go very far outside of the district that we're just not capable of providing the drivers at certain periods of time, or it may actually be less expensive to have the IU transport, because we may have a student that's going into Philadelphia and the IU can utilize one bus for multiple districts, so it basically shares the cost rather than us having one driver, one aide, and one vehicle for one student. So that's where those costs come in. We are looking for an increase of $150,000 there, and as you can see, the costs for transportation for the outside services has gone up, and this year we're probably going to be a little bit low for our budget there. So we're looking to kind of align with the actual there for 2021. Other miscellaneous expenditures. So this cost is the drivers in the contract. We reimburse them for the CDL portion of their driver's licensing. And so that was previously about $68, and now it's up to about $71. The CDL portion has increased. So when they renew their driver's license every 4 years, they would pay the regular fee that you and I would pay, well, not you and I, but you guys would pay. And then we reimburse them for the overage, which is about $71. And so we're looking at about maybe a $70 increase this year. We have just an extra driver that we have calculated that'll be due this coming year. As we go down this slide, and then we go down the next slide, you'll see that the accounts are the same. We break these out 70% and 30%. So this is our transportation public, which is 70%, and then the next slide will be our non-public, which is going to be 30% of the same account. You'll see on here, some of these were incorrectly balanced before. So even though it looks like an increase or a decrease, it's actually breaking even, and I just split it correctly with the 70-30%. Okay. So we have laundry services. That is what it is. It's laundry service for the gentlemen in the garage to clean their uniforms, our mats, things like that. The next line item is going to actually go down a little bit. This is for our annual radio fees and repairs to equipment. So these are our CB radios in our buses and things like that. The next line item is outside services, repairs, so parts. The The parts cost and the labor cost for outside services has increased a bit, so we do have to kind of bump that up a little bit, so we're looking for a $6,600 increase there. Rental equipment, we no longer have that line, we now own our skid steer, so we no longer rent that. Other purchases, so travel testing is our tank inspection, so these are tank inspection fees. And so travel testing is basically they come in and they have to test the fuel tank. So they basically, like, kind of the way it was explained to me is they kind of dredge the bottom of it a bit when it's low and check how much sediment's in there. Auto liability insurance, this has gone up $39.44 this year. That is what it is. Transportation, telecommunications, so this is the one that we're not, it looks as though there's a variance here and there's actually not, we're just increasing here and decreasing down below for the 70-30 split. And so this is for postage. We have really reduced this over the years a bit because we have now been utilizing Power School, but we still mail out the bus cards for kindergarten, first grade, students that are new to the district, and our non-public school students. Okay. Everyone else will utilize the Power School for their busing information. This travel, $580, there's no increase, just a proper split, and this is tolls, so we do use the turnpike to go down to different schools in Philadelphia and things for our special needs students, so these are tolls for our buses. The next line item is, this is for towing. The actual was very much down. We were not running as much as we were in 2021, but our towing, we're looking to have that even. We don't need an increase or decrease there. General supplies. So this is, of course, the some of the inflation on our parts and things like that we do repairs in-house, but those are for mostly our parts and things like that. We are also asking to possibly purchase a snow blower for the skid steer, and that is going to be purchased at CoStar price for $8,600. That will attach to the skid steer that we had purchased, and so that will actually blow the snow up and over the fencing, because we just have no place to put snow.
Who's driving it?
Normally Kenny drives it, but they did give me a spin around the lot once.
Sorry.
Bottled gas and propane, that you'll see in the 2021 year was unprecedentedly low, and that was due to not utilizing those items due to the COVID. But so that is basically for our bottled gas and propane. Those costs are going up, but we believe that we can break even there. Of course, I split it correctly, so that's why you see that it looks like there's a decrease, but there's not in the overall bottom line.
What uses bottled gas or propane?
So the forklifts use the propane, and that would be in the garage. So our gasoline, this is really, we've remained steady here, but we really are looking at this, and I've got a whole nother slide on fuel and diesel, so we'll address that when we get down there.
What uses gasoline versus diesel? All the buses are diesel?
The full-size buses are diesel, a lot of our small buses are gas, and all of our minivans are gas.
And all of our maintenance vehicles are gas.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So the diesel fuel, and like I said, we'll get to that down the bottom, but the world market is just really unpredictable at this moment. So when we did this budget, it was back in January, and we were a little bit more steady, and we thought that we would be looking okay. We had plenty of money in this budget. The highest rate at that point was like $2.22 a gallon. And based on the world market, we use about 187,000 gallons a year. We would have been perfectly fine. We're not sure if that's going to actually be the case, and I'll get to that.
Do we buy it like in a contract, like a bulk?
Yeah. Yeah, we partner with all the districts in intermediate.
I remember you said that before, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Meals and refreshment here, same thing, just the cost has gone up a little bit. This particular line item for meals is for our drivers and our state police when the state police come in for inspections in July. We like to keep them happy, our buses go right through, a few days. And I think, I don't know if that's gonna, we have not finished there. Can we move that? It's a little bit longer.
There's nothing on the screen.
Okay, there's gotta be, because that last line item is gonna be for the technology fees for the,
Well, as I look at the presentation
cut
that
off?
was uploaded,
Must
there's
have
nothing
cut
on
off.
that line, so
Yeah, it must
something
have.
must have. cut off.
oh, okay, it must have.
So,
It's okay, Jess, just move
Okay.
on. There you go.
This is then, of course, basically a repeat of the first slide, but this is the 30% breakout for the non-public section. If you'd like, I can reiterate, or we can just move forward. So the overall budget numbers, we do have an increase. We're looking for an additional $269,000 over last year. Remember, at least $150,000 of that is for our cost for IU transportation. All right, so talking about those fuel costs, like I said, so our current locked-in cost, our gas is $1.15 per gallon, $1.16 per gallon, and our diesel is
Where are those pumps located?
under lock and key. Diesel, we are purchasing currently for $1.51.9. And so we made a very, very fortunate mistake that we, yes, very fortunate. We committed to gallons that we were not able to use because we did not utilize as much over COVID. So we are still currently in this year paying these rates with a slight penalty. So even at the $1.51, we're coming in around $1.69, $1.70. So that's extremely fortunate on our behalf. There is going to be a point where they tell us they're not going to honor that anymore, but we're going to ride it out as long until they tell us otherwise. So our annual committed gallons for gas, we use about 37.5, and for diesel, we use about 187,000 gallons per school year, per year. And that includes the summertime as well. So based on the March 8th opening market, the gas was at $3.57, and our diesel was opening the market, world market at $3.91. So that would put our gas at $133,000, diesel at $733,000. And so our current requested budgets, as you can see, is well under that. And so our current requested budgets is able to hold $2.73 a gallon and $2.22 a gallon for the diesel. We do, along with the IU, we watch the world markets. We do try to make a general consensus and go in when it's low. We also do have the opportunity to jump in on our own without them and lock in, which we did that last one, and so we even got much lower than the other districts in the IU. So we will keep an eye on that world market daily as we're going forward to try and get closer. One of the other things is historically in the spring and the summer, the fuel costs do go up and then they start to go down, so we watch that as well. And so right now with being spring and with what's going on in the world, that is also driving up those costs. So we will continue to keep an eye on that, but wanted to make you guys aware that where our budget is not sitting right with the world market right this moment.
So those prices came in on March 8th, that's when the world markets were about at their highest. Oil was about $130 to $140 a barrel, whether it was like crude or the other kind of crude oil. But anyway, since then, actually today, oil was under $100 a barrel. Yeah, oil dropped. So it's starting to, that pressure's starting to ease up a little bit. They're the press today was talking about impacts of another lockdown, COVID lockdown in China. That China wouldn't need as much fuel, and also that the fact that Ukrainians and the Russians were talking. So those are the things that they think that is impacting the price per barrel to start to come down. Still much higher than it was before all this crazy stuff happened, but we can see it starting to ease. So
When do you have to make how long does our contract go, or when does it end?
So it will end when we run out of the committed gallons that we purchased in our last contract. We're kind of, like as Jess said, the COVID put us kind of behind. We didn't see COVID coming, so we had purchased our gallons way before that. So we stopped running the last marketing period of the year. So we didn't use a quarter of our gas for the year. So those volumes went to the next year. So we had to use those up before we started into the next year's commitment that we already had in place. So our current contract, it would end at the end of this year. That's why we're in the market for next year.
Okay.
Unfortunately, if we would have done another year or two, you don't know, right? So some of those gallons will carry us into next year, but what we're looking for is next year's fuel at this point. So we don't ever have to lock it in. We can float it all year if we wanted to. If we felt it just wasn't at a place where we wanted to lock in, we could float it. But if it gets down to a reasonable amount, we'll lock it in.
And when you lock it, it's just for a full year, you don't lock it for...
We can lock it in for as long as we want, but based on the world markets right now, we probably wouldn't lock it in for more than a year, maybe two. Kelly just was able to lock in some reasonable electric rates for 2 years. We come off of a 5-year contract, and they went way up on us for electric rates. So we're dealing with that. But Kelly watches the electric market every day, and we hit a sweet spot, and we locked it in, and it saved us a little bit of money on electricity. So those are the things we do.
That's awesome.
Trying to figure out the best time to buy.
We got the best.
The kids should come spend a day in your office.
All right, so our fleet update. Current inventory, we have 76 full-size buses, one 48-passenger bus, 21 buses that are 28 to 30 passenger, 11 wheelchair buses, and 10 vans, which includes our mail and security. The mail no longer has a fully devoted vehicle. We share that, so we changed the hours on the interoffice mail delivery, and they now use a route van that we use in the morning and the afternoon, they use in the middle of the day. So currently, we have 54% of our fleet is less than 10 years old. As you know, we were purchasing approximately 8 vehicles per year, and we've kind of backed that down since the COVID hit us and hit our budget a bit, so we're down to about 5. And so this year, we're only projecting to replace 5 vehicles. We're not asking for the 550 because we do not need to replace vans for quite some time now. Our vans are all a bit newer. So we have between 15 and 19 years, we have 26 plus 1 that's over 20 years. We have between 10 and 14 years, we have 27 vehicles. 5 to 9 years, we have 36 vehicles, and new to 4 years, we have 27 vehicles. These the 15 to 19 years, that's going to change out very shortly, and we're going to bump up our new. We actually have our 5 buses are being lettered right now, so They should hopefully be coming to us very, very shortly. We've waited a long time for those. So our fleet mileage here, we've got 26 vehicles with less than $50,000 miles on them. And then, as you can see, we have varying degrees, and we have 3 that are over 250,000 miles. So we do get quite the mileage out of these vehicles. They last us a long time, and they are well maintained. We have a very good group.
When I came in 2015, the district was not budgeting any money at all for vehicle replacement. But we had not bought buses for quite some time, and quite frankly, the fleet was extremely old and in bad shape. The board made a commitment for $850,000 a year to transportation budget, and we've utilized every penny of that every year to replace buses and put kids on safe vehicles to take them back and forth. As Jess said, we did back that off to $500,000 when COVID hit, because our budget took such a hit. But it's really something that, as we get into next year's budget, we really want to look at replacing that money and getting that back up so that we can get back onto that schedule of replacement.
So our replacement plan, what we're looking to do is to get rid of these 5 vehicles, so we'd be replacing them. These vehicles would go out for bid, and then these would be the 5 vehicles that we would be looking to replace. So these would be, majority of the time they give us a trade-in value and that sort of thing. And then looking ahead to 23, 24, we have an additional, we have 6 vehicles here. And so the reason why there's 6 here is we will be asking for just over that 550. We have 5 full-size buses, and then we have 1 mini bus. A couple of updates on our department while we're here. We've had some increase to the responsibilities in the department. We have some additional department reports that are due. We've had increase in manual payroll with multiple changes to schedules. We've had an increase in homeless and foster students, unaccompanied youth. So we spend more time working with other districts to get these students busing. We work with the IU to get them busing. These students' locations can change day to day for some of the homeless students and foster students, unfortunately. And then we have to redo everything that we've done. We have some transient students that we're changing busing every couple of weeks for, depending on their situation. We have an increase in dual busing. What we used to have is like maybe 1 or 2. We are up to, I believe, like 54 students that are dual busing. And so this is, causes us to work with the district registration department to see the eligibility of the student. So this is typically for students that have 2 homes in the district with a 50-50 custody agreement, and then they get transportation twice. So they get transportation to both homes. So that has added quite the increase. And then with that, we are coordinating custody schedules with parents, and then of course coordinating those with the drivers. We have an increase in transportation for the Penridge Cyber students going to tech and home and things like that. We have an increase in the middays, the post-AM runs and the pre-PM runs. So this is we have special tech runs for RAM days. We have Keystone testing transportation that we've been providing. We have additional work study programs. That is significantly increasing. And then of course we have the increase in driver shortage, which is causing staff and mechanics to be driving routes, and then increased dispatch time managing coverages. So in order not to leave any students home, we have rearranged runs multiple times. We have had drivers filling in on different pieces, whether it be substitutes, things like that. So When we have coverage issues, there's a lot of time being spent on the phone to contact other drivers and things to make those arrangements. So what we're proposing is we have a 900-hour clerk position at transportation. And so we would like to request that that be eliminated and a full-time secretary position be created in the transportation department. And so over on the left is the current duties for the 900-hour clerk. On the right is the additional duties that we would like to add to that position as a full-time secretary. And so right now, the 900-hour clerk does all the field trip arrangements, invoicing for those, processing the reimbursements to the drivers, maintaining all of the files, doing the end of the year reports for the trip cost versus the athletic costs. And then the other thing, I don't think I even have written up there, she does all of the bidding process for the drivers to be awarded trips. For the trips that are overrun time, she's coordinating with substitute drivers, retired drivers, or strictly trip drivers to be able to do one-way drop-off so that the regular driver can then go and pick up at the end of that trip. And so some of the additional duties that we would like to add on to that would be, of course, tracking the cost for the PDE 2057 reports at the end of the year, assist the garage with depreciation reports for access, help with the student ridership reports, which is a different access report that the drivers complete. So that is working with Pupil Services to get the names of those students, creating the forms, getting them to the drivers fill them out, bring them back to her. That data is collected and then sent back over. We would like that position to handle the dual busing coordination, as well as communicating with the dual busing families over the summertime. So we do have to reach out to all of those families over the summertime to see if they still have the same custody agreements, providing us with the custody agreements, making sure that they're still interested in the dual busing. And then of course, we would have this person assist the router with notifications to families of bus stop changes, bus number changes, time changes, and assisting the router with clerical duties, create medical forms, which is in the beginning of the school year, the nurses send over the information for students that have medical issues that we would need to provide that information to the drivers, so we would have them do that. And then maintain and order our annual MVR records, so each of the drivers has to have a motor vehicle record run every year, and assist with processing and purchase orders for the bus garage as well.
Who does all those additional duties now?
So my router is doing some of those duties, and she works outside of her 8 hours to do that. My regular secretary is receiving overtime to handle some of those duties. I'm handling a lot of those duties, as well as Rose.
So would that change the 900 hours to a normal, like, full-time is like 28, or is that?
So it would be a 12-month secretary position.
And you'll see that change even in the dollars. We talk about all new positions in one slide. This is the only one that impacts transportation. So we wanted that represented too.
And the work done that Jeff talked about in the medical access program, is really something, in the medical access program, this information that's being gathered, we need to gather that information in order to be reimbursed by the medical access program. So these services are in place for these students that qualify for medical access, but if we're not able to gather the information accurately and get it documented correctly, we can't bill medical access for those services. So this is really a position, extra help in an area that will generate dollars back to the school district. So it's very important. And we actually have a person that works full-time in Sherry's, Dr. Durr's office, that does the access. That's all she does, is the access work for the rest of the student, the rest of the parts that aren't transportation is what I'm trying to say. All the services provided to those kids. So that's a huge job, and this part of it's very important to be able to generate that reimbursement from the transportation side. And it's really been a struggle to get that because we just don't have enough manpower, because we're always worried about getting the next kid home and who's gonna drive the next bus, because that's the state we're in right now with lack of drivers and and at any point in time, Rose can be on the road, Jess can be on the road, Nancy, our router, can be on the road, and and it basically leaves the office with the secretary, and at the same time, you could have two of the mechanics on the road driving, and the third mechanic gets called out to go to a bus accident. So it's just, we're running thin, and it's.
And we also run from 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. So I am in there at 5, and so myself and my secretary Lori, we do the first shift. So I'm done by 1:30 and she's done by 2 o'clock, and that rarely happens. And then we have Rose and Nancy who do the 8:30 to 5 shift. So there's a lot of hours that are there that, if we could have an additional person just to kind of cover maybe a middle shift, would significantly help. One of the other duties that would be required in here, as all of our staff pretty well, would be a requirement to have a CDL as well.
Mrs. Kraus, Mrs. Vrobel, we take every opportunity we have publicly to thank you and your department. There are lots of people who are doing a lot more work with, in your case, a lot less in terms of bodies and fewer resources that way. So we just want to thank you for all of the changes that you've made, all the ways that you've kept. Lots of school districts, we read lots of stories about bus runs being canceled or alternated and those types of services. And that hasn't happened here in Pembridge. And that's not because we're fully staffed, right? But you have figured out ways to do that. And so we really do want to just take an opportunity to thank you and appreciate that work. Thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome, of course.
Thank you, Rose.
Operations is next.
Mr. Harper will take over.
Excuse me off.
So each year, I survey all the principals, the building administrators, for something we call the non-routine budget. It's the first slide here, and this is a request to all the building administrators are the things that they see in their building that they need replacement that doesn't get funded out of their budget. So I allocate almost 10% of the operations budget to do things like carpet, stage curtains, and I have some photos of examples of what went into this. So you can see the middle column is the request from the buildings. You can see it's $679,000, and again, we only allocate about $300 to those budgets, so I have to pare that down. Safety, security, and those sort of things, usually the ones that went out for most of these projects. So I'll jump to the next slide. We can come back to this if you want to see the numbers again, but some representative projects are things like restroom sinks that are pretty bad condition. They're so bad they've been repaired over the years and they need to be replaced.
That was duct tape.
That's duct tape.
Yes, that is duct tape. That is not our standard here, so we won't be replacing those. This is actually in the high school. We started this project last year. This is the Family Consumer Science Department. There's a lot of countertops, same thing. It's Formica. Once water gets under that, they just don't get better over time. We've actually had one of our in-house mechanics learn how to do the solid surface countertops. It's like a Corian product, and he did one of the Family Consumer Science labs last summer. We're doing additional projects this year, so we're not using contracted services. We're actually doing it in-house, and did a great job. This is another continued project. This is South Middle School's auditorium. For those of you who have been there, it's a really small space, and it's an old school. We've been, over the years, trying to update stage lighting, sound systems, and those, I believe we're in phase 3 of what we started, and future conversations of if there will be an expansion at South Middle School. All the items that are being purchased now can be repurposed in a future auditorium if that project comes to fruition. These are some examples of carpet replacement. It's actually West Rock Hill Elementary's main office. It's some old carpet getting worn out. It gets a lot of traffic. On the right, that's a walk-off carpet in the high school. Obviously, you've seen its day, not in good condition. We need to replace that. Some others, so popular thing over COVID is getting water bottle fillers instead of the fountain. It's on the left, that's what they look like, the bottle filler portion of it. Actually disable the bubbler so that kids aren't drinking from the fountain, they're actually filling bottles. And we've been adding them as we could in different spaces. Whiteboards, we still actually have some blackboards at South Middle School. Either replace or reface those whiteboards so that they have, or the blackboards to whiteboards, so that they have something more usable for them, more friendly colors and things like that. Another thing that's every year, request for more CCTV cameras in various locations and card access. So these are exterior doors that have card access. We've recently done a rekeying project. You heard Site Logic talk about it earlier. They're finishing up a keying project, and we've identified a need to have more card access in place of key locations, because you lose a key, that's much more difficult to rectify than a lost card, which we can turn off almost automatically. So we're not doing every door, but some of the doors that are more frequently used, we're doing the card access at those locations. So that was, there's a lot of those on this list. I think this may be the last, one more. So a few of our playgrounds, they have this containment system to keep the playground mulch inside. They're made of plastic, and over the years, whether it's from mowers hitting them or whatnot, they get damaged and become a safety concern. So we're replacing some of these mulch containment borders in a few of our playgrounds. I think that is the last slide in there, yes. So that's the non-routine, and that represents, I can go back to the beginning if you want to see the numbers on that.
Yeah, Kelly, I had a question on those numbers. How did you determine, who gets, like in the high school gets more than they requested, it looks, or estimated requests?
Yes. So
And some of the elementary schools get dramatically different, from 73,000 to 5,000, or even South Middle School 177 down to 27.5. How is that?
right.
It's not like a percentage or anything. It looks like it's some other method.
You're correct. It's somewhat subjective, but again, it's safety and security are the higher level things. And for the high school, for example, and in the high school's auditorium, they've had some significant sound system and lighting problems. If you've ever been to any performances, I think even opening day of school, we had to bring in a remote projector because our main projector wasn't working. A lot of that money's going into these type of systems. So some of the other schools, like Siler, for example, they didn't have a lot of requests, so their numbers aren't that high, or they got pared down. Well, that's not the best example there. The original requests were 73. They had a lot of things like redoing an entire playground that didn't fall into a security or safety parameter, really. So it's somewhat subjective, but it's things that, or a higher need for different schools trying to get those things done with a certain pot of money.
So I was curious about the South. What's the Silers, that's a big, a playground is, we did it, it was like $40,000, so that would be a big chunk. But at South, what were some of the things, or maybe one thing that they?
So South, I don't think I listed on my notes what the originals were for that. Like, they wanted additional storage. So outside the building, everyone has storage problems. They wanted to redo, I believe it's out near the football field. There's a small building that they wanted to use for storage, and to redo that is almost a total rebuild. So those accounted for a lot of those big number things. I think locker painting in the school was another one. They want to rekey their entire inside of the building. Some of those projects, they're not really a safety security, it's more of there's keys that are lost, and they just wanted to have a unified system. and they're pretty pricey to do those projects. That's some of the things that were there at sales. Any other questions on non-routine? I'll go through all the show and tell photos. So again, that's about 10%, a little under 10% of the operations budget. So the way I have the rest of it structured, similar to this, you'll see function, object codes, a description of what that line item is. The two blue columns are the actual from 1920 year and from 2021, the actual expenditures. The gray column is the current year approved budget. The green column is the requested budget for this year, and orange is the variance between the gray and the green. I'm really just gonna highlight the ones that have the changes. If you have questions about other lines, we can talk about that. But the first one that has a variance is the general property and liability insurance. It's an increase of $41,000. And this is an actual quote from an insurance company. Not really something we have control over. Those are the numbers. I had to take money out of other areas for that increase. I guess I should note, this budget does not have an increase or a decrease. It's moving money from one bucket to another to accomplish what we need to do.
So this is the estimate we've been provided by our insurance brokers. We'll get follow-up estimates as we get closer to July 1st, and we'll get final numbers. But really, for Kelly's, the general property insurance is being driven by property values and increased costs of replacement of properties. So we've got a lot of buildings and a lot of money, tied up in that to the building as assets. So to replace those buildings, that's what is driving the insurance rates. And we're also in a very hard insurance market right now. We're seeing that with all the lines of insurance. So it's not just general property. It's driving up. You'll see that in different budgets.
All right, so the next line item is a $20,000 increase. And this is telecommunication, phones, and those type of services that, if you look historically in 2021, we paid $92,000. There's been some vendor changes, not by our control, but different vendors getting bought out by others, us searching for vendors with a better deal. The numbers went up. Some of that 92,000 could be explained by the hot spots that we had over COVID that we had to provide. Those things fall under this telecommunication budget. I don't know that we're gonna have those same expenses, but looking at somewhere in the middle, a realistic number to me was $75,000 for a budget for this year. We don't wanna be short, so I tried to get a fair number for what I think it will be this coming year, so I increased that budget by $20,000. The next increase is $900 for the tech supplies and fees. And this is really our work order system and our facility scheduling system that we use here. It's also preventive maintenance for our mechanical equipment, and it's an actual increase. That's our total for next year is $18,900 for those systems. And a good fair note, starting to shop around for other vendors. There's some other vendors that have similar services. We're gonna be looking at them next year to see if it's a good comparison, if we can save money, and it's just the right thing to do to see if we're getting good value from the systems that we're using. Any questions on that slide? All right. So this is playing into the next slide on the deck. This is our natural gas, electricity, and fuel oil consumption. And the chart, I know the numbers are small. This is from 2009 on the left, all the way to 2021 on the right. And this is actual usage, not cost, because cost can vary. This is showing the usage, and you can apply a factor to understand what we're actually paying. We'll talk about that more on the next slide, but you can see natural gas was down this previous year, and really it's weather related. So if we were less natural gas, and look at the other side, the fuel oil, we used more fuel oil, and they're both heating sources. So they kind of balance out to some degree. We have some schools that are exclusively fuel oil. We consume more fuel oil as opposed to gas. And ornamental electricity, we're about where we were last year, but a little bit less. And again, this is consumption, not price. Any questions on the graphs? Okay, so Same type of layout here. The blue columns are actuals from 2 previous years. Gray is this current budget year, green is the requested, and orange is the budget variance. And the first line item that has a change of about $23,000 is our technical services. These are contracted services. And this is just a function of what did we use in previous years. And I dialed it down by that much money because I needed to get some other funds. And like you see in the previous slide, that had increases. There's increases here, so it's just a function of trying to balance the budget, put money in the right buckets where it's coming from, where it needs to go. So I took a decrease in that one. The next one is it's laundry services. We do mops, laundering. It's not that much money every year, but our actuals are pretty low. So I'm trying to reduce it closer to what the expenses really look like. The next line item is water and sewer. Our actuals were lower, and this is just me trying to get closer to the actual expenditure. Took $25,000 out of that. The next one is a reduction of $30,000 in repair maintenance services. Those contracted services where we call someone out to fix a boiler or chillers or those type of services that they're actually doing something as opposed to the other one that's a professional service. The next 3 are increases. So general supplies, and this is up because of some of the non-routine things are supplies, but also we've trended up higher in previous years. If you look at the 2021, with a lot more supplies purchases, so we're increasing this to try to match what's predicted for the next year. The next 2 are utilities, and Sean kind of talked about this earlier. The first one is natural gas, and the second one's electricity. I think everyone's felt the pinch at home that electricity and gas prices have gone way up, almost doubled, and we use a broker to lock in prices. Like a good example is electricity. I think a floating rate right now is about 9 cents per kilowatt. We were previously paying about 5 cents a kilowatt, and we came into this floating part based on our broker recommended that the market was so volatile, you couldn't tell if prices were gonna go up or down. We floated for a little bit, and prices, it's just like the stock market. It's hard to predict, but you keep an eye on it and you try to make the best decision you can. We locked in somewhere around 7 cents per kilowatt, where we're somewhere in between. We couldn't get as low as we were. Prices aren't going backwards, they're definitely going up. They're gonna hit a peak, probably come back down, but we locked in for a good period to stabilize our budgets, but it's gonna require a budget increase, and those are my estimates of what we're gonna pay next year. An extra $20,000 for gas and an extra $50,000 for electricity. The next change is a reduction of $62,000. And if anyone remembers from last year, this was new capital equipment. We bought a robotic floor scrubber, autonomous floor machine. It is in here in the high school. It's saving man hours, about 4 hours a person every day. We typically run it during 3rd shift. It does all the hallways in the school, so it's been a great money saver. That's why there's nothing in there. That's a reduction for new equipment. The next line item is a $11,600 increase. This is capital equipment replacement as opposed to brand new. So we're replacing some equipment, hallway floor scrubbers, vacuums, those sort of things. That's what this increase is for here. The last line item is an increase of $5,000. This is dues and fees. We pay DEP fees, we pay tank, there's a lot of DEP and EPA dues and fees we pay. This isn't like for a membership for something. These are required permit applications we have to pay just to run our heating systems, and we have underground storage tanks. Those fees come out of this account, and I'm really just trying to match what the previous expenses were with this increase. So that was a lot on the slide, and there's some lines I didn't talk about. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Same type of chart. This is grounds maintenance, athletic maintenance, and equipment maintenance, just different categories. The only changes here are on grounds maintenance. The first one is supplies, and this is really me taking funds from one bucket into this. We were purchasing our bulk road salt and sidewalk salt out of a just general supply budget. It makes more sense to me that that's at the grounds of the district. This is the right bucket it should be taken out of, just so that we can have the right purchases taken out of the right budget. And that's about what we spend in road salt and sidewalk salt every year, $16,000. The next one is a $24,000 increase. So this is some capital equipment. So, and I have another slide after this that'll show you how we make some of these decisions, but this is getting us a new tractor. Every school cuts their own grass, they plow their own snow, and we typically use tractors with different implements on them, snow blowers, brushes, salt spreaders, and this is getting a new tractor. I'll show you my list that shows you every school and their conditions on the next slide. Any questions about this slide till I jump to that sheet that details all the grounds equipment? Okay, so this one's a little more difficult to read, but this is the district-wide mower list, and it's really listed by condition from worst to best. So this is replacing the Steiner at Grass Elementary. It's in very poor condition, and again, it's a new modern version, and they'll be able to do all the services that they need to perform with this new tractor.
It's only 22 years old. That's it.
And it's not our oldest, but it's in the worst condition. So every year, I go through this, reprioritize, re-evaluate all the equipment in the district to see if somebody else is in worse condition. And we often will do a hand-me-down process that if we're replacing something at one school and that can be fixed and repurposed somewhere else, we do that. So some of these things will move around where they're best suited, but this is on the list for this year for replacement. Any questions with that slide? Okay, so this is an example of what one of those old 20-something old tractors look like with a plow. We take good care of them. They get a lot of hard use. You're plowing snow, you're cutting grass, and it is the right tool for the job. They are a multi-purpose type piece of equipment, different attachments. They work great for us. It's just they only last so long.
A can of paint wouldn't have made a difference.
I'm being facetious. I want to know that they come in green.
I was just thinking that.
Okay, I think this is the last slide for the budget, same format, previous years, current budget and a variance. So our automobile liability insurance, the quote was actually a little bit less. And I don't know that this is the final quote. I think this evolves. This is just a quote at that point in time, and that's what we put in for the budget. It could go up or down a little bit, and that's where that number is at for this year. Under the vehicle operation maintenance, I did a reduction of $7,000 just because the budget wasn't really matching the expenses, so I took $7,000 out of this. And the big ticket item that's a deduction is $70,000. Historically, just like with buses, we try to have our fleet of maintenance trucks upgraded, and I would typically have the same kind of sheet that you saw for the mowers for our trucks. It's so hard to get trucks now. I took it out of the budget. There's certain vehicles that they're not even making right now, and it's so difficult to get them. Even in the past, we've ordered trucks and it's taken almost a year to get in. It wasn't worth keeping it in the budget this year. Our vehicles are getting to that plateau where they're not in that horrible condition, so we could go another year without replacing one. So I took it out of the budget because of the other things, electricity and gas increases and increases in other places. This was a good place to take that money and move it into a different bucket to help out expenses elsewhere. The last change is another reduction of $5,000. The expenses weren't really matching the previous expenses. So, and this is another, I don't want to say relatively new category where we were paid for security services out of other budgets. So there's not a good history of what was taken out of this. It's just My office didn't code it to the right budget where it probably should have come out of here, but I think it's a fair number to have 25,000 in for these security services, contracted services. So I did take a reduction out of that. Any questions?
Is that your switch?
So these could be the burglar alarms, fire alarms, card access, cameras, and those sort of things typically would come out of this type of budget. The last line item, it's not a change, but it's there, that $7,000, that's Raptor. That's what falls under security services, it's about $7,000 a year for that contract. But there's no change to that, it's flat again this year. Any questions from that slide? And that was the end.
Awesome.
So it's no change, it's just moving numbers from one category to another to try to match expenditures and where the needs are. And that is the operations budget for your consideration. The end.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Envy your job.
Thank you. Keep
Mr.
them
Harper,
busy.
just an opportunity, as we did with transportation, to publicly thank you for your department. One of the real sources of pride in this district is the care that the buildings show. And that's evident through your staff, but also through your planning, long-term and short-term. So please thank all of your staff, and a huge thank you to you for that. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
General fund.
All right, 41 pages.
It's up to you.
I already looked.
Sean's ready for the general fund.
All right, guys.
The big balance.
Time limit, 2.5 hours?
What?
Just playing.
Don't worry about it, we're used to it.
No,
As long as it's
Not a
zero
problem
on the
for us.
bottom, it's a balance, we're good.
I'm not quite there yet.
Nope.
All right, so this is a first look at the budget for next year. We're gonna look at the calendar, review our revenue expense history, Act 1 index, revenue expenditures for 22-23, where they're at right now, fund balance review, retirement cost information, and where do we go from here after we get to the end of this presentation. I will be looking at showing you things not at such a granular level as transportation and operations. I'll try to keep it a bit higher level for you. It's nice for you guys to hear these granular budgets, though, to actually be able to see when it's drilled down what we're actually doing with the money. So, but for me to do that, we would be here about 10 hours. So we won't go that far down. Preliminary budget, Act 1 timeline, as you know, back in October, we passed the resolution. We wouldn't go above the index. The index is 3.4% this year. So that's what district is allowed to raise taxes by. The budget timeline, I show you this each year, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. Check marks are already completed, the things that we did. The skipped items are the things that we don't have to do because we decided to skip the Act 1 budget index process, that Act 1 budget process, and not pass the budget back in January. So a lot of this stuff is all Act 1. We don't have to worry about it. And here you come to March 14th. That's tonight. We're looking at our budget. And then the rest of the calendar as we go through April and May, when we have our finance meetings. We budget reviews each month, and then you get to May, you have your first budget passage or approval or vote, and then in June you have your second budget vote. June 13th will be your second. So you have to pass the budget twice in a public school district, once in May as a proposed final budget, once in June as the final budget. And at that point in time, we set our tax rates and start the process of getting our tax bills out and getting our revenue in. Revenue and expense history. Really I want to show you here is what we try to do at the end of the year. We try to have revenues above expenditures. Then we try to have excess here, not a deficiency, and when we transfer those dollars to the capital projects fund, which is what funds our site logic presentations and cool capital projects that we do. We really try not to impact out here the fund balance, except for the last 2 years where we set $1.5 million aside thinking that we might need it for COVID, with the idea that if we didn't need it, we put it in fund balance at the end of we put it in capital projects. At the end of 2021, we took that extra 1.5 and moved it to capital. Act One index, currently we're at 135.2555 mils of real estate tax on the median assessed value. That's median assessed property. That tax bill is about $4,200. The Act One index allows, like we said, 3.4%, which is 4.5987 mils. That's the millage that you could increase if you had to, take us to 139.8. The impact on the median assessed value would be about $145. So that's the impact on your average tax bill or your median tax bill. It'd be about $145 if the district raised taxes to the index. And that would generate just under $3 million of additional property tax revenue if the index was taken. Revenue, we might as well go straight to the bottom line. Here's where we're at. We're at $148.6 million in revenue. In this current budget run, we're at $149.6 million in expenditures. We're $976,000 away from being budgeted, or balanced budget. We're up 2.66% in revenue and up 3.33% in expenditures. So, total overall budget is up about almost $4 million. And it's really being driven by cost. Everything that we're looking at is costing us more money. We talked about fuel, we talked about electricity, school supplies, everything. Employees are costing more just to get them in the door. We've been through all this because you guys know it's coming. So this budget is high, but on the flip side of that, we're really lucky at the local revenue side. We're seeing some really nice numbers, and I'll show them to you. But so it's really offsetting that impact to a great extent. We could be in a lot worse shape right now than we are. So here's where our breakdown is for our revenue breakdown. We are almost $110 million out of local revenue, 35.7 million out of state, and 3.3 million out of federal revenues. Breakdown of local revenues, really our biggest numbers, $85 million in real estate taxes, current and interim real estate taxes, and another 21.5 million out of the current 511 taxes. That's your earned income tax, that's your real estate transfer tax. That's those taxes. So that's making up 105 million out of the 109 million local revenue. So that's where your money's coming from, the drivers. Here's our assessed value, our biggest local revenue. Assessed value, you can see the increases in assessed value over the last few years. That's really what has been allowing us to balance budgets without having to raise taxes, is that we're seeing that growth in assessed value, which means building is happening within the district. We're at 656 million this year, current year. Right now, our assessed values are about 660 million. That's the county duplicate that just came out, the county tax bill that just came out. So that's a great starting point. So we start with that number, and then we watch it until we get to our budget in June.
So you see increases with new home sales. Because of the new home sale, they get evaluated at a higher level from the county than they were in the existing home.
It still hasn't reassessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe the assessment in Bucks County is as old as some of us in the room.
Yeah, I remember when
1972.
it was.
That's your average
That's
point.
right. I got 3
It was
years on
40
it.
years when we moved back here, and so I've been here for 17 years.
See,
So
that's-
how they overcome that is the assessment office looks at the new buyer and look at the purchase price, and they readjust it.
Mhm.
So that's helping us.
The other thing we look at is our collection percentage. We've run in about 97.4, 97.6. We had a really good year last year. And you know, at 10% here is a lot of money. Currently, as of February 28th, we're 97.31%. Still collecting this year. So we will end up somewhere in between those two numbers probably. But what I do, I conservatively budget at 97%. And so that can be an argument, well, for it or against it, but we try to be conservative. We have 97%. I think when I came, the district was budgeting at 95, and we have increased that over the years to try to get more realistic, but not get too crazy with it. That because if you end up wrong, not missing it the wrong way is not pretty. So this is what we're looking for, about $84 million as a gross realistic, or a net, I'm sorry, the net after the collection percentage. So. Okay, so this is just an example of what would happen if the district decided to raise taxes. So Act 1, the top line, if it took the whole thing, $2.9 million. I showed you this before, it's about $144. And then what's 1 mil? 1 mil is about $640,000. It will cost the median assessed property $31. And you have 1%, costs about $42. 2 mils, $62. 2%, $85. To balance the budget right now, the $976,000, it'd be about $48 per median household tax rate increase. Okay, the next biggest avenue of revenues is the state funding. Basic ed is the largest one. Actually, it's not anymore. Basic ed is about 11.6. The largest one now is a reimbursement of retirement. Our retirement reimbursement has outpaced our basic education funding. That's sad at all levels. So I have 202,000 increase in this, but I will qualify that by saying that is the actual increase for the current year. It's not, I do not have anything built in for next year. The state's budget that they're trying to come up with right now, because they're all over the place. We'll talk about that a little bit. Special education funding, about $3.7 million, and you'll see when we look at special ed how inadequate that number is. $72,000 increase. Again, that's from the current year. Transportation, about a $1.7 million reimbursement. It's up about $134,000. This is reimbursement for our debt service payments. It's going up because we rearranged our debt service payments. We moved some of them forward, so that's going up a little bit, and it changes each year. Property tax allocation is, what that is, an amount of money coming from the state from the slot machines, and every dollar we get, we have to lower the tax bills of our taxpayers through the homestead farmstead exemption. So that's $1 for $1. So we 2.556, we reduce tax bills by 2.556. If that 2.556 doesn't come from the state, our taxpayers get a tax increase without us doing anything, and they're not happy with us. It's great as long as it keeps coming. When it doesn't come, we're going to get blamed for giving them a tax increase that we don't actually give them. We get half of our Social Security payments back and half of our retirement payments back. And that makes up $35.7 million. So we're up almost $1 million. State revenue. This is the governor's budget address. The only important thing here is the bottom in red. It said this is really cool looking, but don't count on any of it happening. Because the General Assembly is going to wipe that all out and change it. This is really Governor Wolf's chance at a legacy budget. He wants to vote $1.25 billion increase in the basic ed funding. Both sides of the legislature came out and said that's not going to happen. And don't count on it, school districts. So we're not going to count on it. That same red language was on last year's budget. I didn't even have to change it because the same thing happened last year. And last year we did not put a dime in because we had no idea what it was going to be. So anyways, he wants to beef up basic ed funding. He wants to put $300 million more in to catch lower funded districts up, to bring them up. He wants to add $200 million in special ed. 170 million in PSERS, which he has to because the PSERS rate, is going up, and the state has to pay for half of it. And the rest of that really are either reimbursements or the pre-K stuff, or funded state formula reimbursements that the state really has to fund, like transportation and so forth. So Another thing he's trying to go after this year is charter school reform, which is one that really needs to happen. It would save districts about $373 million if they just changed the formulas on charter school reform. Set a rate of $9,800 for regular ed students and base special educations on the services that the kids get instead of some flat rate. Estimate it would save us about $606,000 if these charter school changes went in place. So if there's something you want to get behind, and go talk to our local legislatures about, is that one. He's also proposing a $45,000 minimum teacher salary, which we're in good shape there, and his another change to minimum wages, $12 an hour, and then $15 an hour by 2028. So the governor's state proposal would get us $2.8 million more in basic ed funding and $441,000 in special ed funding. It's a 24% increase in basic ed and a 12% increase in special ed. Again, those are great numbers to look at, but it's not going to happen, so we're not going to count on it. I would be surprised if we see 10% on that. So this is a new slide this year that I kind of got the idea from our state organization, who they put a slide together like this for the state numbers. So I wanted to pull it apart and put it together for us. So our state funding growth from 2010-11 to 2021 in the areas of special ed is the yellow, the orange is basic ed, the purple is the retirement or the pension reimbursement, and the gray is or charter school tuition reimbursement. So they cut that out, so that's a negative $257,000. The rest of those line items have gone up by $12.6 million. So our funding in those areas went up $12.6 million. Our mandated costs in pension, charter school tuition, and special education has went up by over $30 million in the same time frame. So mandated costs up $30 million over 10 years. The state's only paid for $12.6 million of that. Right, where's the rest of it come from? Comes from the people who live in Penridge School District. It's right on the backs of our taxpayers. It's mandated cost. There's nothing there that any of us can do to change. We have to provide special education services as needed by our kids. We have to pay the pension costs as set by the state. And we have to pay charter school tuition bills based on the tuition formula set in law by the state. So it's a pretty telling slide as to what's happening in funding in Pennsylvania for education. And then most districts are going to have the same type of, especially the districts around us, are going to have the same type of a gap between their funding and their mandated costs. Well, that's a new one. I'm kind of proud of that one.
It's a very nice slide.
I was waiting for that. All right, state property tax relief. I told you about the $2.5 million that comes from the slot machines, and this is just the breakout of it. We have about 11,800 properties that qualify for that out of the homestead, 126 farmstead.
There's still 21 pages to go.
Yeah, I'm just getting warmed up. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. All right, so basically it works out to about $212 of reduction on the tax bill is what that works out to. That changes every year based on the amount of money we get from the state and based on the number of properties that qualify. Goes up or down each year. This is the federal revenue. Any big change here is the ESSER funding. We budgeted, so each year since the pandemic hit, we've budgeted ESSER's money. The last ESSER's 3, is about a $5 million grant. Dr. Rabarchek has been here and laid out the plan for that money. So what we're doing is we're splitting it in half. We'll put 2.5 million in this year, 2.5 million in next year, and then we'll get the debt drop off. But anyways, there's also programs in the budget that money pays for. So it should be we pay for it as we go. We will, if we only spend 1.4 million, we will only recognize 1.4 million of revenue. So this is just a description of the different objects within the budget. I'm not going to go over this. You guys can take a look at this whatever you want to. But the main objects, the biggest drivers here are salaries 100 and benefits 200s, and then the rest of the expenditures are into those different buckets. So here's the budget. Expenditures broken down by object. We're at 149.6 million. Just under about $69 million is salaries, 39.5 is benefits, and then each of the different areas, and you can see the variances. So we're up about $4.8 million. We are expecting principal payments, debt service to go up because we had the year where it went way down because of the refinancing, comes back up, and we're also now we're now actually accounting for the tech school debt that we refinanced in principal and interest because we're making the principal and interest payments instead of giving that money to tech school and then they would make it. So that's why that's up so high. But okay. And this is a breakdown of the benefit line items. Biggest driver here, of course, retirement costs, $23.8 million. This year's increase in the rates up drives at about 700,000, along with the increase in salaries is what drives that up. And we are actually down about $500,000 based on the changes that we're making in those other areas. And this is the chart, 46% plus in salaries and 26% in benefits. So total 72% of the entire budget is going to salaries and benefits. So we're very heavily driven, costs are driven by personnel in the school district. And the rest of the chart is made up of those other areas. And we're about 8% on principal and interest, or principal payments. So our debt is lower than a normal school district. An average school district can be somewhere between 12 to 15% debt payments, and we're down about 8%. So we're able to put more money towards kids than we are towards debt. The other way expenditures are broken down in school district budgets are by function areas. The lower the number, the closer the expenditures are to kids. 1,100 regular education, 1,200 special ed, 13 is vocational education. And then when you get into the 2000s, now you're talking about support services, and the lower the number in the 2000, the closer the expenditures are to the kids. So like 2100s, we're talking about direct support services to the kids, like people, personnel, staff, your guidance people, those type of people that aren't necessarily classroom teachers, but they're directly working with kids, children. So, and then the further you get away, 2,300 is your administration, 2,400 are your nurses, 2,500 is business office, 2,600 operations, 27 is transportation. So further you come down the list, the further you're getting away from the classroom, but still services that are supporting the kids. And then you get to the 3,200 series, nothing to do with the classroom at all. It's support or activities, sports, and that type of stuff for kids. And then when you get into 5,000 series, then you're talking about our debt service. So here's the budget broken out into those functions. We spend about $61 million on regular ed. So in the classroom, all the costs associated within the classroom. $26.5 million in special education programs. And that's the increase here. And you really, you see this increase. It's not necessarily that that the specific special education kids went up or anything like that, but again, we're trying to bring special education programs back, mental health facilities, things like that. We're gonna talk about that program that's gonna be starting, so that's why you're seeing the 1,200 line item up. And really, we're not really cutting anything in regular education, but a lot of our retirements were regular education teachers, so you're seeing that it looks like we cut regular ed, but we really didn't. That's where the savings are this year, because we have lower salaries. Salary savings from retirements, and pretty much all of them are regular ed, so there's little nuances that explain why things go up and down. We're not cutting our vocational technical school budget, but we took the debt service out and moved it down into the 5,000 series. But we didn't reduce it. We're still paying for it. This isn't another series. So you see, there's reasons why things go up and down. But anyway, total instruction, almost $92 million of the total $150 million budget is direct instruction in the classroom. Again, that's always a number where we want to see that going up and the other things going down. So here's your pupil personnel services, and straight down through your 2000 series, your support services. So again, normal ups and downs in these areas. And we're up about $1 million there. Student activities, sports, we're actually down. So we're down on that total. And we talked about debt service up, driven by the debt service coming back up because of the one-time savings from the refinancing that we did 2 years ago, plus the money coming down from the tech school debt. And then we have a budgetary reserve that we keep in the budget each year at $337,000 in case of an emergency. So we're just under $150 million budget, total expenditures. And again, expenditures by function, 61% of every dollar goes directly to the classroom. Another 29% goes to supporting the classroom in some way. So, and we're about 10% of dollars that aren't associated with the classroom or supporting the classroom. So we want to see these go up, and we want to see those squeeze down, and that's what we've been doing. So what's happening? What's driving it? The budget this year. We look at this each year. Total wages are up about 1.8 million. So we have contract increases. We have increases in number of positions that we'll go over. We have wage increases that we put in place just in order to get people to come to work. We've talked about those and how to dealt with those. We have 1.1 million in a slide that I'll show you that has new positions from the things that we've been talking about. About 700,000 in the retirement increase, about 225,000 in the tech school line item for our share of the bill up there, and then technology security, 400,000, something we'll talk about with Diane, and then books, energy, supplies, all those 600 line items up about 500,000, and then our debt I showed you, about 1.6 million. So about 6.3 million on the expenditure side. What's revenues or savings are offset? About 3.8 million in revenue and about 1.5 million in medical and RX costs. So that's about 5.3, which makes up that $976,000 gap. So in round numbers. So here's requested positions for next year. We have a full-day kindergarten teacher and a full-day kindergarten aide, because we're going to add an additional full-day kindergarten room. We have a half of a music teacher for the rock band program that was passed as program improvement. We have one psychologist, one middle school counselor, and that's all increased caseload needs. We have an elementary artistic support teacher and an two elementary support, autistic support teachers, both based on caseload compliance. So the numbers are going up. We need to add teachers. This next group of, don't never touch it. The next group is the Academy for Student Wellness that we've been talking about for quite a bit of time and we're preparing the area for. So we're budgeting for a social worker, a crisis counselor, a special education teacher, and 2 teacher aides in that to start. Okay? And again, Dr. Dura will go through this in detail much better than I can when she comes to the meeting and talks about it. We also have a gifted teacher at the high school. Again, that's caseload compliance. So again, that's Dr. Dura will go over that. We're adding, we got a request to add more security guards, actually 3. So we're gonna put 1 in, hopefully put 1 in this year if the board agrees, and then try to step that up to get more security guard. And we're really trying to reach down into the middle schools with the security guards to develop those relationships with the kids and the security guards, so that some of that happens before the kids get to high school. So this first one we'll try to get into the middle school, and then the other 2 will follow in this footsteps. So, but it's step 1 in the process. And the last one is what Jess was asking for, changing that 900-hour clerk to a secretary to help her with all the additional work that she has with all our changes in transportation. So again, it's total cost of about $1.1 million for all those new positions. So, and really all of them are caseload compliances or our mental health needs, and those type of things. So, and our continued expansion on full-day care. So, okay. School and department budgets. Just to give you an idea, when we start the budget process, each department submits their budget. We sit down and we meet with them. And this gives you a little bit more granular information without actually going to account by account within these different budgets. But you can see in each of the different budgets what their actuals and what their budgets are this year, and what they're asking for, and then what the changes are. So I'm looking like a really bad guy because I have a $1.8 million increase in my business office budget, but I carry all the debt service in my budget, so that's where that's coming from. Plus I carry the tech school tuition. So that's where that those increases are coming from, those 2 areas. Technology, $400,000 increase. And we really need to sit with the board and talk about technology security. And that's what we're trying to do with these type of increases, and we'll get into the detail with you on that. So, and most of the other budgets are pretty good shape. Sometimes the supervisors' budgets, like our science things, these programs go up and down depending on what they're trying to do in those different programs. And it's again things that Dr. Shad will talk about.
And that's primarily textbook, in terms of what department your textbooks fall into, because textbooks are expensive.
Right. And then the rest of the budgets, people services, it's up, but it's being driven by those programs that we're trying to, the academy that we're trying to put in place. Transportation, Jess just explained to you why her budget's up. And then the elementary buildings, they're usually right on spot. They're not up too much. Pretty good shape. And the middles and the high schools. So, and then program improvement, something that Dr. Shad will talk about is her needs there. So again, trying to drive money to the classrooms. Just a quick update on fund balance, and you guys have seen this. Right now we have our future retirement set aside of about $6 million. Our unreserved fund balance of 9.9. Total general fund balance of 16 million is down from 18. That's because we took out 1.5 million and moved it to capital projects. And our capital projects commitment at the end of last fiscal year was 18.3 million. And as you know, we have a spending plan for 3 or 4 years in place for those dollars. PSERS rates. PSERS, we're 34.94%. We're going to go to 35.26%, and the projection out to 27-28, 36.91%. So the huge increases are over. We're dealing with these smaller increases But again, so you got the rate increase, then plus you have your salary increase that goes with it. That's what makes it the change in the dollar value. So when you look at when you hold the salary number and then just look at the increases to the budget, it's not a lot of money. But when you start multiplying that against the salary increase, then that starts to ache up there a little bit. But we used to be in 14, 15 at 21% rate. Now we're at 35% rate. So I remember the day when the rate was about 1%. And then this is just the Peasers. This is just what happened to it. The history of the Peasers. Back in the early 2000s, 2009 the rate was 4.76. Before that, about 2005, it was actually like 1 or below 1. And then the legislature under Tom Ridge changed the multiplier for state employees, which then was piggybacked over to the school retirees or school system, and it changed the multiplier of what you get for each year of service. And then there was the 2008 market crash, and then there was a formula change in the law which kicked the can down the road to fund Peasers. So Peasers became severely underfunded, and when all that stuff hit, the rate went this way. And this is we'll go out here probably another 10 or 15 years before it comes back down. So when business managers get together and we start talking, we start making bets about how high it'll go. So here's where we're at, outstanding considerations. So as we talked about before, different insurances are in the budget as estimates now. They will probably come in a little lower. They might not, I don't know, but they're in as estimates. School bus funding, we have $500,000 in. Again, it used to be $850,000. It's something that we want to try to recapture in the future. Budgetary reserve for unseen expenses is in at $337,000. So again, we have a little bit of a cushion there if we need it. World events impact on gas, diesel, and fuel oil. We talked about this. So what is going to happen to those costs for us in the next year? We really don't know. Good signs that the cost of a barrel of oil is coming back down, but it's still a very volatile world that we're in. They requested new positions. Again, something that has to be approved by you as the school board, what positions we put in the budget. The academy needs that we're implementing the new academy, what needs are there, employees and so forth. And the technical school budget, of course, isn't finalized yet, and what impact that will have on our budget. I do have an increase built in there from what I had a few weeks ago from the tech school. So the revenue side, what happens with the state funding, what happens with the 22-23 governor's proposal. Again, I don't have anything in there for that, just don't know what to put in. And they're promising a early budget this year, which they're saying means the second week of June. That doesn't help us a bit. Utilizing ESSER3 funding, that $5 million, we have to spend that by September of 2024. They're already talking about asking the federal government for an extension on those dates, but we will see what happens with that. But we have a plan in place to spend that money and try to follow through with that. But I'm sure that changes will occur, things will come up, and we'll have some funds in place for that. And then the state budget, what's going to happen with it? I guess that's a repeat, and any other potential legislation or revenue sources that we could see. So that's where we're at right now. So we're about $976,000 apart.
Sean, I have a general question on the budgeting process. After we approve the budget, because it looks like in looking through this, and even when we were on the transportation one, people were spending over the budgeted amounts that we had, and on some it's a decrease too. So it may all come out in the wash. But
yeah.
Does somebody have to come back to the board then? Why are we spending more than what we approved from a budget standpoint, and who has the authority to to spend more than what we approved from a budget?
So the budget's a breathing, living document. It's set really now, in the next few months for a time period that's 15 months away. So no, it'll never be perfect. We will always make changes to the budget. It'll always change with our needs and so forth. But each month, if you see under the part of the agenda where the bills and stuff are at, you'll see budget transfers. And we're asking your approval to move money from budget line item to budget line item. And a lot of those budgets that you saw for the different schools and departments, they will move money throughout the fiscal year within their budget as they need to. Or they may decide that, okay, we thought we needed this, but this bigger need came up. So we're not gonna do that this year. We're gonna move the money over here because this tractor, it can no longer be fixed or used, and we need to do something with that. So we'll constantly be doing that. We can't do that by law until October 1st. So starting in October is when you'll start to see budget transfers for each year. And they're in that, so you'll see them each month in there with all the bills, listings, and so forth. And there's not a lot. There's a page or maybe a page and a half. As we get closer to the end of the year, you'll see more things. You know, the budgets will start getting tighter. The principals will realize they need something, and they'll be moving money here or there. As long as they're living within the amount of money the board gave them as a budget, I'm okay with however they need to spend that money in their building. We give them that autonomy to do that. If they go over that, or if they have some type of an emergency that would push them over that, that's when they know they need to come to us, Dr. Bolton and myself, or Dr. Barczyk, Dr. Shy, and we'll look for money elsewhere. We may have money sitting in Kelly's budget that I know he's not going to use, that I could use for something else. We'll pull that. Or we saw the budgetary reserve of $337,000. We'll pull from that. We'll move it around. So, but always you have the final say in the budget. So you always see a list of budget transfers to pass. And we really, unless it's an emergency, we make those budget transfers go through before we allow them to spend the money. But sometimes it's an emergency. We spend the money and then we come back in, and you guys pass the budget transfer. And you're always very welcome or nice about that, and you know that if we're putting it in front of you, that it must be something we need. So.
But I think to answer your question, I want to make sure I understand what you were asking. Those budget transfers are almost always, I mean, I don't know if it's 98, 99%, are almost always within the same budget. So that budget itself is not going over. All they're doing is they're moving it from bucket 1 to bucket 2, but the overall total is staying within what was.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. The one I was, and I just pulled up an example, was to look at, say, school and department budget. So the high school for 2021, 2022, well, it's, I don't know whether the actual versus the.
Yeah, your high school?
Yeah. So the high school, our actual is considerably over from where our budget was, right?
Yeah, so what we've been doing with the high school budget, it's actually we've been paring it down. The high school actual was 763, and then the budget was 621, and the budget's 596. What happened was, Dr. Bowen, you know this, we took money from the high school control and put it with our curriculum supervisors. So each curriculum supervisor builds a budget for their subject, and we have them in there. So we've taken money that was actually controlled for curriculum items by the high school, and we moved it to the curriculum supervisor's budget. So that money is controlled by that supervisor and then used accordingly.
And Mr. Russell, those are 3 separate school
Yeah, I
years?
see that.
Okay,
I see
all
that.
right.
I was thinking I had a column here that was and that's
Right, the first two of the
yeah,
same
right,
school
right,
year.
exactly.
Yeah, so your actual and then the next.
And there actually has not been a building, and you can correct me, Mr. Dogger, if I'm wrong, there has not been a building or department budget that has actually been overspent for the year that it's in since I've been superintendent.
Okay.
Right, and so, like, if you looked at the actual budget for the high school in 2021, it would be more than that $764,000, right, in terms of what their actual budget was. But But the reason it has gone down is because we've reallocated the funds and said, no, the curriculum material should be controlled within the curriculum budgets, not within the high school budgets,
Right.
right? Because the supervisors were within their budgets, and that just didn't make any sense from a standpoint. So you'll see that in the program improvement with Dr. Scheiker.
So the reality is that no one's overspending what they're
Correct.
allocated, they're just reallocating within that
Yeah.
group.
And if they did, it would be an emergency that would come through us, and we would find money in a different bucket. But it just, it really, like, those monthly transfers you see are not, they're within that same line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's it, questions?
Lots of numbers.
That's the numbers, so,
Thank you.
yeah, so any discussion, any guidance you have for us moving forward? Happy to hear, happy to listen to, where you would like to see us at.
Always good to see some good sound financial positions.
Usually you do, at least I'm trying to remember back over the last several years, in the very beginning when you're at this stage, there has been a gap in other years, and then
Always works out.
Your $150 million budget, $976,000 is
That's
a very small amount
Right.
as a percentage, but yet it is $976,000. And it's finding every dollar of that $976,000 to figure out how to either balance the budget or increase the revenue to. So it comes a question of, as a board, what are your instructions to us as an administration to do? Do you want to see that $976,000 go away as an expenditure? You want us to try to figure out how to cover it from a revenue standpoint? So those are the things, the guidance that we need as an administrative team as to where we should go moving forward.
yeah, the half of, right.
Into the budget, I think it's, right, it's 2/3 of the total budget. I think from a tax increase, it was 1.2%, 1.1%, something like that, if we were to cover it right now. It was that slide that he worked in terms of what right there, so 1.127 is where we are from a percentage standpoint.
Yeah, so about 1.5 mils,
1.5 mils.
so about $48 to the average, or to the set median assessed value.
And so that's our goal over the next 2 months, to get those two numbers and get them, right, as collapsed as possible.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mr. Delmer.
You want?
Thank you. That's it.
That's it.
The next finance,
We're done.
the next finance committee meeting will be scheduled April 11th, 2022.